friend of mine got it, and he switched everything around back to basically Windows 7, because, you know, it's configurable. I don't think so myself.
Yeah, I don't think it. Sometimes I look behind me and I go,
most of the stuff I've been learning in the last several years has been from like 22-year-old years.
yes, that's what I mean. I'm sure my next people will still be in their 20s. But here are the speakers.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
They don't have a way to see the customer service, or I forget what, see the customer service, or just the fact that they don't last as long. So I forget which, but I got enough about them that I decided I was not going to buy myself, at least not me. I ended up with for my numbers, well, both Windows 8 and HPs.
Yeah, I know. By the time I got home, I started everything. So I can get back up to speed by then.
To the office?
No, well, to the high school.
Oh.
Interviews I had to do out there, so I mean, another day at awesome on it. So I've got a week's worth of copies.
Well, my particular HP does not have touch screen. It's got the multi.
All right, welcome everybody. I'm Michelle Rogers. I'm with the Southeast Michigan Media Lab, and this is Akhtab Borka, and he is a videographer and the host of News at Noon. And he's leading a workshop on producing video stories for the web. Just a little bit of background about the lab if you've never been here before. We launched this about a year ago through Journal Register Company, which is part of Digital First Media, and we own publications across Southeast Michigan, including the Oakland Press, the Macomb Daily, Heritage Media, the News Herald Downriver, and the Morning Sun in Mount Pleasant, as well as some other weekly newspapers. And this is kind of a community outreach project where we bring the audience in the newsroom and we train you on how to gather news and use social media, but it's also, we encourage that for a news sharing partnership, but we also do it as public outreach. So for example, I've had senior citizens come in here, we've set up the Facebook account so they can stay in touch with their grandkids. I've helped the Chamber of Commerce set up a Twitter account so they can tweet out to their audience, and we don't benefit in any way except for getting people on the web and using the tools that will help them communicate. So welcome, Akhtab.
Well, thank you, Michelle, and thank you very much everyone for coming in today. Before I start, obviously I'd like to start with a little bit of introduction for everyone, and I'd start with myself. As Michelle mentioned, I work for the Oakland Press that's in Pontiac, Michigan, Oakland County, Michigan. You can expect that kind of introduction from someone who's lived all his life in Pakistan and who's been here for about 2 years. But pardon me for those little mistakes. But myself, I've been a multimedia journalist and a broadcast journalist for about 8 years now, and I've only been with the Oakland Press for, like I said, for about 2 years. And then before that, I worked for CBS News Radio in Pakistan, and I also worked for about a year for Reuters news agency, and then about 4 years for a local TV channel there. I was a host there, so that's a mixture of broadcast plus print and online journalism. But before we start, can we have a little bit of a one-line introduction from each one of us so that might bring us all closer? Can we start here?
Me? I'm Crystal Elliott. I just started working for Heritage about a month ago. I'm a reporter for the Ypsilanti Courier, and I don't really have much experience with video, so here I am.
Oh, thanks, Crystal.
I'm Jim Pruitt. I'm also a full-time multimedia journalist with Heritage. I cover Saline mostly, and I'm just here to get more experience on making videos.
Wonderful. Sir?
I'm Don Selleck. I'm from Holy Toledo. I'm primarily interested in internet marketing, and I represented a couple different companies, but I primarily am interested in building my own brand on the internet, and I'm very interested in videos.
Oh, thank you.
Sorry about that.
Hi, I'm Bridget Londra. I'm in kind of a career transition. I'm looking to expand a freelance editing and writing business, and I don't know anything about producing video, but I'm a storyteller, so this
Well,
is
I
great.
hope you learn something when you walk out today. We all know Michelle, so can we?
My name's Bernadette Quist. I'm the executive director of the Dexter Area Chamber of Commerce.
Wonderful.
And I met Michelle yesterday and Jim Walsh from Heritage, and she told me about this, and we are interested in putting some more video up on our website for the chamber and maybe helping some of our members do the same thing.
Cool.
I'm Andrew Miliaka. I'm an architect transitioning hopefully into a career that's more multimedia journalism possibly, and I've considered doing webcasts, so that brings me here.
Oh, thanks for coming in today. Good luck with that new project, sir.
I'm Lee Rohr. I have a small remodeling business, and I build everything, but I need to build websites along with marketing.
All right, thanks for coming in.
I'm Hillary Bradley. I moved out to Michigan about a year ago when I got married. I was a professional writing major when I was in college, and I've been using this year that I had off to work on a couple of books, but now I'd like to sort of get back into the tech writing, and I'm interested in the video producing and everything as well.
All right, great. Thanks for coming in. And so, I'm sorry.
I'm Roger Rail. I'm a venture catalyst, but I do a lot of live streaming, recording of video, and I started a video meetup group, well, small M, Ann Arbor Video Interest Group in January. Michelle was it's for anybody involved in video in any way, interested in video, doing video, needs video. You meet once a month, the second Wednesday of every month. The acronym is A2VIG.org.
All right. Thank you, everyone, thanks for coming in. So what I gather here is that I guess 3 or 4 of us have some sort of a journalism background, who work for newspaper or have been in broadcast, but most of, I believe, people here who've never had a working experience with a journalism career or a TV or a newspaper, and that's what I plan to have to sort of start from the beginning as to what we mean by video storytelling and how we as newspapers and as digital first company prioritize our video stories and embed them with our stories or text stories on our website. So producing videos, well, basically the concept behind producing video stories is the concept which is behind any story. What we do is we tell stories, but just in a different format. You read stories in newspapers, you watch stories on TV, you get stories from pictures, from any kind of format. But with video, it's just another format of telling stories. It's all about stories. There is a reason you watch one story, the same story on a particular TV channel and not on a different TV channel, or there's a reason you read a particular story in one newspaper and not in the other story, is because they tell the story from a different perspective, from a different angle, from a different taste that perhaps you're interested in. Perhaps one newspaper tells a story better than the other one TV channel tells a story better than the other one. The fact is the stories are same. When a very recent example, when the whole Boston bombing and everything happened, we had our own choices of watching different TV channels, different newspapers, because of one simple reason. Because we liked the way they told us the stories. We liked the way they presented the stories. We liked the way they had a different sort of analysis with those stories. And that's what we're doing here today. When you tell stories with video, there are certain things, basic things that you need to keep in your mind, and the rest, I would say it's up to you. Sky's the limit. It's up to you how you tell the story. Our job as journalists is to tell the story, and that's what we're going to talk about here today. So, to start with, and I'll talk from my own perspective and the perspective of the journalists or my colleagues who work for different newspapers here, and I think in today's world, especially with the newspapers, they are expecting us to be multimedia journalists. The difference between, I would say, a multimedia journalist and journalists on TV is that you must have seen it on TV. You have a huge crew to work on a different story. There's a reporter, and then there's a cameraman, and there are technical staff who do their certain jobs to tell you one story. The videographer basically just works on a camera, shoots a video. The reporter only has to worry about getting the information, writing the story. The editor, does editing of video and audio and everything. But with multimedia journalists, they all just combine into one person. It's called like a one-man band, and that's what we're expected to do now with newspapers or organizations, online organizations that we work for, and that's what we have to keep in mind when we go out to cover the stories. So, in terms of video stories, when you tell video story, let's say when you have a camera in your hand and you're ready to go out to shoot a story, there are two things very important that we have to keep in mind, and that's I'm going to start talking about. Never tell a story that you don't know, because then you end up going like nowhere. I mean, I don't want to listen to a story from someone who doesn't know the story himself or herself. Why should I listen to it? And that's the art of it. If I know the story, only then I'll be able to tell you. Or there is chances, even if I know the story, I may not be able to tell you well because I'm not a good storyteller. But however good storyteller I am, if I don't know the story, end of story. I can't tell you. So that's the beginning of your, I would say, task. Whenever you go out or you're covering a story, you have to know the story yourself. All the angles, or however many angles, or the content that you need to tell the story or transfer it to the other story. See, the difference between, I would say, and I'll tell you about this more when we interview people, we as journalists are sort of standing between two worlds. I would say one world is of the people who have lots of stories to tell, and on the other side they have lots of people who want to hear that story. Now the reason you're in between is because they can't tell the story to them the way it should be told. If you are out of the equation, they would tell their stories to them, but they don't know. They're not very good storytellers. That's why you come in between. You get the content from them, you get the story from them, and tell it to the people who want, with refining stuff and doing the stuff that you need to do for being a good storyteller. So you have to know the story first that you're telling, so that you can tell it better to the people you're telling the story. Second point is, I'm writing, I mentioned this point, see what's happening on the spot here, and by spot I mean when you're out with a camera covering an event or interviewing someone, you just have to have an open eye or see what's happening on the spot. Let's say you were out to cover an event or like, a press conference, a wedding, or there's a crime scene. You have to know everything that's going around here. Sometimes, I would say, even experienced journalists, from my experience, have done those little mistakes that they go out, cover the event, and they miss the most important part. They haven't shot an interview with maybe the organizer of the event, or they haven't shot an interview with the person who has the best content or who knows about the event. So you know what's happening on the spot, and also the information, those little things of like the banners that are on the spot, or the people who have come to cover that event or to join that event, stuff like that. I mean, not just in your mind, but even on the ground, you have to know whatever is placed there or set up there. You have to make video of everything, just so just to be on the safe side. You may not end up using all that stuff, but just to make sure that you have all the stuff that could be used later on. So these are the two basic things that you have to remember when you go and cover that story. Now there are two things when you go out and shoot a video of something. There are two things, as we call them. First one is B-roll, the others are interview. B-roll is just raw video. When you're going out, an interview is what interview is. You talk to people, you get their stories and everything. But first I'm going to talk about B-roll. So you have to shoot B-roll for all the stories, even if it's let's say I'm doing a story about domestic violence, and I'm going to talk to a person, a domestic violence survivor or victim who has his or her story to tell. On the spot, it's just going to be that person, and I'm going to interview them. But in order to tell the story better, I need to have some B-roll. And by that B-roll, I mean maybe I want to shoot a couple of shots of the location where I'm doing the interview, the house where that person lives, or the area, or the street names and everything. So you have to have those kind of B-roll just that will help you do the better tell your story. Now there are certain things that you have to shoot when it comes to B-rolls. And the 4 things that I've thought would be very important to shoot. Actions, as I said. When you're out there, when you're covering a marathon, where you're covering a festival, when you're covering some kind of weather event or an accident, you have to cover the action, whatever is happening, moving stuff. Whenever, you see, I don't know if you've ever noticed it, but if I showed you 2 videos of the same event, where in one video you had lots of moving where people are running and doing stuff, and then on one video there'll be like people sitting and just, you know, not talking much and all that, they're most likely that you're going to end up liking a story where there's more action, because people like action. Whenever there's happening, people are running, maybe on the marathon, and, you know, at the festivals, kids are playing, or there's a lot of natural sound. We like action, so don't forget to shoot action when you're there. That's why they say don't miss the action, I believe. And like I said, most important part, sometimes it may not be the action, but like I said, the banners of those events, the logos, the house, you know, the name of the street that you go and cover. When you're, you know, when you're out to like shoot individuals, like, you know, if they're coming out of the car, they're getting back into the car, they're coming out of the house, they're getting back in the house, those kind of things that help you, you know, edit your stories well. The third thing, and the most important one, is establishing shots. Now, what I mean by establishing shots is, let's say you are at an event covering, we went the other day to, what was that event? Alright, just forget about it, any event. Let's say you're here today to cover that media lab. Let's say you came here, you shot everything in here, you shot my presentation, you spoke with the people who attended it, you asked them the questions, you know, how was the event and everything, and then you pack up and you go back. And when you go back, you realize, gee, you didn't have a shot of the building itself, you didn't have a shot of the town itself. That's your establishing shot. The wider picture, you know, when you're showing a place on Google Maps, you don't just go directly onto the street and cross-section and say this is sometimes. It's better to come from the wider angle, say this is Michigan, this is the county, and this is the street of the cross-section. So that wide shot, or that establishing shot, is a shot that establishes the story, establishes the town you're in, establishes the area that you're in. So that's what we call establishing shots. And the next point, which is sequencing, is very much related with establishing shots. What we mean by sequence is, and you know, this is what the slide mentions, the wide shot of something, and of a room, some people working, close-ups of one person. There are 3 things. There are 3 sequences, in fact, that we are talking about. Wide, medium, and tight. That's what, you know, all the major, you know, if you're familiar with TV journalism and broadcast, it's a very familiar words, wide, medium, and close. By wide, I mean, again, a wide establishing shot. Let's say if you were in the street, or if you were outside that building, you want to have that wide shot of the building that says, okay, this is the building, and that's the name, or maybe that's the street. The medium shot of that sequence would be a little close-up of that building, maybe showing the name of the building, or, you know, the address, or it could be, I don't know, there's an address on the door, and that's your medium shot. And the close shot of people's like faces, or when they're working, or they're writing something, they're typing on their typewriter, like keyboards, those are your close shots. So when you have the proper sequence, it better helps to tell your story. If let's say if you start your story with a close shot, people are not going to know where you are, or what that person's doing, or what he's or she's working on. So it's better to start your story with establishing wide shot, and then you come closer to a picture, and then even more closer to tell what exactly that person's doing. Now, before I move on to shooting interviews, is there anything that doesn't make sense with B-rolls, or if I don't make sense, just ask questions, please.
What does the B on B-roll stand for?
Good question.
The B on B-roll.
Yeah, what's the origin of
We
that?
have terms. When you edit, when you're on the Final Cut or any video editing software, there are layers, or I would say, lines of videos. The first line, they call it B-roll, is because apparently the A-roll is your prime video. The interview, let's say I'm doing an interview with you. I'm asking you about your career, I'm asking you about your future goals, you're talking. But while you're talking, I'm putting some B-roll over your interview. Shots of the building that you're in, the shots of places that you're describing. The main character of that story is you, but I don't see your video. I see some other video that describes what you're saying. That's the B-roll. The A-roll is your interview.
So like main and then.
The main point, the main interview is your central video, but then you have things to explain more about it, which is not in your video. It's some else, and I'm putting it over your video so that I'm listening to you, but I'm watching something else which describes your story more. So that's the B-roll, and your interview is the A-roll, which they don't call A-roll, but it's supposed to be A-roll.
You said it was raw footage, but it sounds like also it is fleshing out the whole story.
Yes, it describes your story better. Let's say if you're talking about some town or some website, I'm showing snaps of that website or some video, but it's actually you who's describing it. So you are the A-roll, and that photo of that website or the clip is the B-roll. So that's the B-roll.
It's always the image. It's not, you don't use the audio from the B-roll very often.
Yes, yeah, you don't. Well, sometimes you have to, with a very little, sort of, not completely dead, but very little sound of maybe cars running by, or so something. But you can end up using that.
So since you started with this B-roll, so you know your story. So when you're shooting it, you actually shoot things that are going to go with it, but you don't shoot the A first. You shoot this first. Is that what you're saying?
Well, it depends. I mean, you could shoot the interview first, and it depends on where you are and how, warranted things are. You may end up something's rushing. You can. It's just I'm
it's
putting
not
it.
a sequential thing.
It's not
about importance.
No. These are just the bits and pieces of all the basics that you have to do to put up a story. But one could be done before than the other one. It's up to you. Maybe the person isn't rushed to do the interview. Let's do the interview first and shoot the B-roll later. So it's up to you, or it's up to the events that you're following.
So A and B just kind of differentiates, A being, the main purpose that you're
part.
doing it, and B is like the background, the flavor, the locale, the stuff you're going to need.
Or the extra
to,
footage, you
right,
can say, the extra video that you're shooting. Yep. All right, should I move forward? Now, and then the most important part, a very important part, is shooting interviews. I think no story is ever better told unless you have people talking in them, unless you have people telling their stories or their personal views about anything. I think any story, the reason we watch, I think, TV or read stories is because we have people telling those stories. We don't have things or events telling the stories themselves. Well, sometimes they can, but the more people or the more sound bites or quotations you have in a story, it just makes the story even better and make it more colorful. Now, these are two very, very basic things that you have to keep in mind when you're doing someone's interview. These are very basic things that I think we keep in mind when we're doing regular conversations with each other. The first one is questions. The question that you ask should cover all those 5 W's. like who, what, where, when, why, and subject tells the story to you, and you tell the story. Again, we're coming back to the point where if you don't know the story, you won't be able to tell it to the other people. So in order for you to learn the story yourself, you have to ask those 5 W questions: who, what, where, when, why it happened, where it happened, who did that, when did it happen, things like those, very basic things. I remember in print, and especially in the international wire stories, you always, and this is funny though, but you pick up any Reuters or AP story, in the first paragraph they'll tell you, well, President Obama announced on Tuesday, or President Obama said that on Friday, or they will mention, even if it happened today, they will say he said that on Friday. Or it's 99% given that we know he said it today, or maybe sometimes people don't know it, but majority of the people know that what happened today, but still they mention it just to tell you that when did this event particularly happen. There's a reason they mention it, just to make sure that what if people read that story 10 days later, or a month later, or a year later, they have to know when the story happened and where it happened. And that's why they have bylines. There's a point that we put a byline, date lines like Washington or New York or Ypsilanti, Michigan, so that people know where the event happened. So there is a reason, in order to tell the story with all those 5 W's, we have to mention them, even if people know them. We can't just assume that people, just because people know it, we shouldn't mention it, but we have to mention those 5 W's. So, and in order to mention those 5 W's, you have to know those 5 W's yourself, otherwise you won't be able to tell them. The other thing, and this is also that, the emotion part, I think, is the most important part, which makes this story unique, which is emotions. And by this I mean when you have to be friendly, establish a relation, make him or her feel more comfortable with you. The reason we say this is, let's say you have, alright, let me think of someone. I remember after the Sandy Hook event, we had this lady, the first lady, who was inside the Sandy Hook elementary school, who survived the event. Of course, she saw the shooter by his feet, and later on, she was, I think a few days later, she was on every TV channel telling her story as to what she saw and how she saw it, and she locked herself in the closet for a few hours, you know, before the cops came in and took her out. I saw that lady on 3-4 different channels, but every channel she sounded different, or it sounded different in a way that, you know, the story was coming out with different emotions than the other one. What I'm saying is, she looked different on different, or she sounded different in different channels, is because the way she was talking to that reporter, maybe one reporter established a better contact, a better relation with her than the other one. And that is the reason the story looked better on one channel than the other one. It was the same lady, it was the same story, it was the same events she was describing, but somehow that story sounded better, or I liked listening or watching that story better on one channel than the other one, because she was maybe more friendly with the reporter. She had more emotions when she was talking to a particular reporter. She felt more comfortable in telling her story to one reporter than the other one. I mean, I can't just go and walk into someone and say, hey, tell me your story, and you won't be coming up with emotions to me. You don't know me, you haven't really felt comfortable with me. But if you're telling the same story to your friend, or someone who you know, or someone who you trust, you will end up telling that story better. So you have to keep that in mind. We meet strangers every day, but not everyone is friends with us. We have to make friends with us. We have to make them comfortable with us, and make them believe that, you know, we're there to tell their stories. We're not jerks. I don't know if I can use that word, but it happens sometimes. People don't trust you. I mean, you meet the first time, and there are a lot of things that you have to establish. So you have to keep those things in mind. And then the better contact you establish with the person, the better he or she will be able to tell you the story. Before I move on, any questions on this part? Interviews, emotions?
Would you also say that the questions that the reporters ask could be leading questions to establish that bridge? To make him or her, the person being interviewed, feel a certain way, maybe the leading questions would establish that pathway?
You're right. Sometimes, if you mean exactly what I'm thinking, is that sometimes the best part of the interview comes way later in the conversation, because you start a conversation very lightly with someone who wants to establish a relation with you, and then you ask the most important question later, so that by the time he or she answers your question, they have felt more comfortable with you or established a relation with you. So maybe the initial part of your interview may not be as informative, or interesting things may not come out of those interviews, but later on, by the time when maybe spending 5, 10, 15 minutes with you, the guy feels more comfortable with you, and then you ask that point question to what happened, or describing a story better. Maybe that helps. In fact, what helps sometimes is to do this interview second time. I personally, when I do an interview, what I do is I call the guy, the person, and then talk to them, sort of, ask them the stories and the questions, and what happened with you, all them. And then when I go to them the second time, they're telling the same story to me, but this time with more confidence, with more authority, that they know me, they've already discussed that story with me, and then they trust me. So that also helps sometimes. Any other question? All right, let's move on. So now when you've shot your B-rolls and your interviews, comes editing. You have all the recipe, now you have to cook food. You can't just bring in all the grocery and everything and put them in on the stove, and nothing happens itself. You have to do a little bit of editing. That's what happens with video editing as well. So you have, this is what I do personally, so you have to start with the most powerful sound bites. That's what I do. I would start with interviews. I wouldn't start with B-rolls unless there's huge action or sound, like natural sound or something, I don't know, unexpected happening. But I generally start with people's interviews. So let's say I have a 5 or 6 minute interview, or a half an hour interview, but I'm only supposed to tell that story in like 2 minutes or 3 minutes, however much time I'm given. So I have to go through the whole interview and pick out the best soundbite, the most powerful one, the one that not just describes the story, not just tells the story, but is emotionally powerful, something that makes you want to watch that second time, the third time, the fourth time. It may not happen with every story, but I'm sure with every interview there is the most I would say the strongest part that you want people to listen to or watch, and that would be with emotions and everything. So take out the most powerful sound bites, and that's what the first thing you do. And the second thing is, again, with the B-roll, take out the most powerful B-roll shots, probably with natural sound, which I call here nat sound. When you're covering an event, where there's a race going on, when there's there's a fair going on, when there's a wedding or something, you take out the most important part, B-roll, where there's natural sound, where there's where you're by the river, you hear the shore, where there's a marathon going on, you have people crossing the line and everything. So these are the most powerful B-roll shots with natural sounds. When there's a rocket that takes off, you have that first thing that goes with that big fireball behind it. These are one of the basic examples. The third thing you have to do, and this is very important, to put the sound bites in the best order to tell the story. Now you have, like I said, you have a half hour or 1 hour interview that the person has told you his or her story, but they may not have told you the story in the best order. They might have started in the middle, or they might have started with the conclusion and then told you the first part. See, with every story, we all know that there is a beginning, there's a middle, and there's an end. You can't just have you can't just start a story with a conclusion, or you can't just start a book with something in the middle without explaining anything. So you have to keep that in mind. Every story has some kind of a sequence. So you have to take out the most important sound bites and then put them in an order that tells the story best, with a very nice sequence that starts the story, that has a very good beginning, that has a very good middle, and that has a very nice conclusion to wrap up the story. So you have to keep that that sequence in your mind. Now, the reason I say put the B-roll over jump cuts. Now, jump cuts are, in our broadcast terms, are transitions or cuts that happen between two sound bites. Let's say you have an interview of the same person. You have two sound bites where he or she is describing a particular event, but instead of describing that event in 2 minutes, you have taken out like good 2 40-second sound bites or 30-second sound bites, and you're putting them together. Now, one sound bite ends, and when the other starts, there's a jump cut. You would notice that there comes one sound bite, and that ends, and then the other starts. That doesn't look good, like in raw footage when you're showing it on TV. So to hide that jump cut, you have to put some B-roll over it, so that when the person is describing the story, and at the same time when you're watching that B-roll or the sequence of some other events or pictures, and the jump cut happens underneath or behind that video, you don't really notice it. So that serves two purposes: A, that hides the jump cut, and B, it explains your story more in a better way, so that comes with additional footage and B-roll. And the last thing I mentioned is that you may need an intro before the soundbite to start. Not every soundbite or every interview tells the story itself. We do need introductions in terms of every story. Now, that introduction could be you as a reporter standing up in front of a camera and say, here I am in this town, I'm going to meet so-and-so person who has this wonderful story, and let's listen to that person. That's establishing sort of a good intro to that story. Or you could just be, if you don't want to appear in front of camera, it could just be 2 line or 3 lines of text saying that this and this happened on that day, and we are in this town and talking to that person. That kind of established, rather than just have that person come on camera, soundbite, and say this is what happened, maybe that happened, and people will be like, who's this and what happened? Yeah.
I was just going to say, yeah, I feel uncomfortable on camera, so I often will point the camera down and speak the introduction, and then I just put B-roll over it.
Yes.
So that will just,
Yeah, you could start with B-roll, with natural events, and have your voiceover, saying we're on this street in this road, and the reason we're here today is because of that happened, and then you go to the soundbite. And I'm just saying, because you may have different things to say. I'm just talking very basic terms that it could be different. You could start with a natural soundbite of some events happening, and then describe the whole event as to what happened. So that's what the intro is that. So that's the last point. Any questions to follow up with that? Sir?
You may not have appropriate B-roll for a jump cut. So let's say you got an interview, and then you're talking about something, and you want to skip some unimportant part of the interview, and then jump to a later part of the interview. You could just do like a fade out, a fade in.
Transitions.
To
Different
let them know
transitions.
that there's a time period lost
Yeah.
in there.
Yeah, you could do those. Those transitions do work out well when you don't have the B-roll, as you said. So, but I would personally prefer, if you have a B-roll, it's better to hide those jump cuts with B-roll, so that you don't just hide those jump cuts, but give them a little more information with those extra B-roll shots that are always informative. So that could be done as well. Anything else? Any other question? All right. Thank you. No, not thank you. I want to show you some more videos, but I think the less questions we have in in any of the sessions makes me more uncomfortable. I don't know why. Either you've understood everything that I've said, or you have no idea what I've spoken. So just let me know. Yeah.
I do have a question though about that editing at the end of your presentation. If this is something we're doing at home, do you have any sort of like software recommendations for this? Because
Yes, I would say for the very basic video stuff, if you're using Mac, iMovie is the most preferred software where you can easily take out the chunks of those sound bites that you want to use and put them down. I don't know if you've ever used iMovie, but that,
I don't know.
oh, you don't have a Mac. If you have a PC, then they have Sony Vegas Pro. That is another video editing software for PC, which is very, I mean, I personally preferred Mac, and I've always used, I don't even use iMovie because for our professional reasons we have to use Final Cut. I don't know if any one of you have ever used Final Cut, but that's a very sort of professional tool for video production, so I personally prefer that.
And just a plug for the Media Lab, if you do live in the area, you can come here to the lab and I have a couple Macs that you can use here on site.
Wonderful.
If we, you know what, I didn't bring my computer in, but it's right out. Should I bring it in? I have a Mac. Should I bring it in? I have iMovie too. I've never used it.
Sure.
I've never used it.
Yeah, I don't think you need it for the purpose of this workshop, but if you want to come in for individual instruction, I can help you. I can teach you iMovie.
But I mean, even if you start it, it's very self-explanatory. Very basic stuff that, you know, if you go through some of the instructions that you know, when you open it for the first time, I think you'll know what it basically is about. It's very simple. I mean, even if when you just open it, so it's not that big of a deal.
Okay. And is it easy to move, like, you don't have to stay sequential, you can move something from the end?
You just
Yeah,
drag and drop.
yeah, just drag and drop kind of stuff.
You
Yeah.
can separate the audio from the video.
Yes, you can. You can. Yeah.
So I
Sorry,
have-
I'm sorry.
oh,
It's Ted.
sorry.
Go ahead, Ted.
Well, go ahead.
Oh,
You can go.
I'm sorry, I was in the front and I didn't see the hands back there. I have a really basic question about what if we've never shot video and we don't know anything about the equipment and how to buy it, and what are some good sources online that I could maybe research before I, you know, get something to
Just-
shoot the video with?
You have a smartphone?
Well, yes,
Okay, you can shoot video, right?
but only I think 30 seconds worth, right?
No.
well, it depends on what smartphone you have, but some of them now can
Yeah, I think
shoot up to.
my little camera and my phone will shoot video, but I've never done it, and I know nothing about shooting video.
Well,
Really.
and then again, it's a whole different world is to pick up the equipment, choose equipment. But I would say for very basic reasons, there's nothing that stops you from start using your smartphone and using that as a camera. The only thing you have to keep them in mind, because they're not professional equipment for shooting video, so you got to be like stable and not moving and all
Right,
that.
and
But
that will record sound and everything?
it does, yeah. If
Mhm.
it has a mic with it, it should record
Okay.
sound. So.
Get my little,
Or if you got
Side
a
out.
digital still camera that shoots video.
yeah.
Yeah, there
It's a
are
good place
lots
to
of
start, just to practice.
there are lots of them out now, and like I said, it's very hard to. I mean, it's very hard for me to recommend one because I don't know what purpose you're shooting it for.
Right.
What are your budget constraints, or whether you're how savvy you are with those cameras. So it all depends. Yeah, but like other requirements. So it really
Okay.
depends. You know,
Alright.
with this, the general presentation is for like any kind of camera you use. You know, just don't keep those things in mind,
Okay.
and you should be good with any camera that you use. So yeah, that should be fun. Sir, you had a question?
Well, I was just gonna, mention that I use PCs for everything I do. And there's Movie Maker that comes with most PC software. I use Premiere for the high-end stuff, but there's an intermediate one. It's a package that does conversion and editing and audio editing and all that. It's called AVS4, the Digit 4U. That sometimes they have it for the whole package, like 16 different programs for like $80. And it's good for quick little things. It gives you some capability without having to buy the $600 package.
Some Final Cut.
Yeah, well, I don't use Mac, but in fact, it does some things that the version of Premiere I have doesn't. It supports some of the newer formats and conversions, but just kind of look around on the web and the reviews that people have, talk to other people, come to the A2 Big meeting and talk to people there. Because there's a whole range of video. You know, if you're shooting for broadcast TV, it's different than if you're shooting for web.
Web, you're right.
Because you don't need high res for broadcast TV. I mean, for
web.
web.
Well, these days a lot of web, organizations are insisting on the fact that it should be HD. I don't know why. Maybe it's got to do with the smartphones or tablets that people watch it on. If it's very low resolution and somebody's watching it on a tablet, I think it does make a difference there if it's shot with a HD or not. But you're right. It could be. There is a difference of quality when it comes to TV and web. So that's. All right. Any other question before I move on?
Yeah, I had one going back to about the interviews, the live interviews. So you said, like sometimes it's good to warm them up with a phone call, so they've said it once, so when you go in they're more confident.
Mm-hmm.
But what if it's something really emotional that you might only capture it the first time you trigger it?
You're right. It's I mean, every situation is different from the other. I think the most difficult interviews and sometimes the most difficulties I have is in times of tragedies when people have lost their loved ones, and when you go to them, you can't really warm them up. It's like you go to them, you just show a little bit of comfort, make them more comfortable, and then talk to them for the first time and make them realize that when they're talking to you, they're more comfortable. It's not just, calling them and say, hey, I'm coming to you to talk about you lost your kid, and then I'm coming. I mean, you don't want to sound like that.
You said you interview them first. I'm with
Well, you
that.
can. It depends. I mean, if
But I'm asking where you as a journalist decide, okay, this one needs an interview first to warm them up and get them confident, and this one I shouldn't. I should go in raw.
Well, I would say, other than warming the interviewee up, I would do the pre-interviews just to make myself more aware of the story that I'm doing and cutting some of the redundancies that I might have in the interview. But for that part, I would say, I mean, I've tried doing pre-interviews with people who, have gone through some tragedies and it's worked out with some of them. With some people, it hasn't. People just don't want to talk too much about the event or repeat the event that they've been through. So it's really, I would say, a gray area. It all depends on situation to situation, where you may have very cooperative people who can, talk to you twice and thrice if you want, and sometimes people may not be comfortable. I'd say it's up to the people, up to the event or the time of the event they're going through. It's very difficult. But there's nothing that stops you from trying. I mean, you can certainly go ahead and try and give it a try. That's what journalists do. We're never successful all the time. I mean, all those great interviews that you see on TV, that's the final attempt. I mean, it doesn't really mean that they did it on the first time, or there are lots of interviews we miss just because people don't want to talk about it. So it's a very difficult territory.
What do you think is a good amount of time for a video that you see on a website?
Well, the rule of thumb they taught us in broadcast, which is it should be as long as it's interesting. And it depends on the interest of the people. I mean, if you showed me, I'd say, something that's related to, I don't know, cooking or something, I wouldn't even watch it for like a minute, because I'm not interested in cooking.
Me either.
Yeah. But if it's something, I don't know, technology related or international global news, I mean, that's my interest area, so I can watch it long. But again, if that's my interest area, but only if somebody's telling me interesting stories. So it only depends on how long it sounds interesting to me. So as long as it's interesting, sometimes, you watch, it's like movies. You watch an hour movie and it feels like it wasn't even an hour, it just passed. And sometimes even the shortest movies, they just drag so long, you feel like, sleeping. And I'm sorry, that happened with Lincoln when I went there and watched it. I fell asleep, but you had to watch it because everybody was like, it's a great movie. But it is a great movie, but I mean,
There's some
boring.
good acting, but it's a little slow.
Boring stuff. So
It's
yeah,
very
so
slow.
yeah, it's like that. So as long as it's interesting. So that's why I said the more actions you have, the more powerful sound bites you have, it's going to make it more interesting. So it's all up to the content that we're showing, and it's up to the viewer as well. If he or she is not interested in that particular area, they won't watch it. So you can't really help there. All right, anything
I
else?
guess I asked that because we're told 90 seconds tops.
Well, 90 seconds for our web, stories that go with our stories for a particular on the website, but I've personally been in favor of having longer videos as well, as long as they sound interesting. I mean, sometimes some stories are hard to tell in 90 seconds, and you need larger and longer interviews to tell the story. So I'm all in favor of having longer stories, as long as it's interesting again. So it's good to have 90-second stories, because most of the people who are coming on our websites and watching and reading stories don't really have that much time to maybe spend like 15 minutes on one particular story. But if it's interesting, I mean, they should watch it, I guess.
Yeah, have both. Make the short version as a teaser for
And you
general
can
information,
make
more in
make
depth
it
watch this. Are you gonna talk about releases at all?
releases.
Yeah, for you shitty people, and if they're not in a public place, let's say, you might want to get a release from it.
Oh, yeah, that's something like that.
Get them
Like
to sign a
permission.
release form.
Permission.
Giving them permission.
Well, Off-Top comes from an editorial background where
Yeah.
you're working for the media, you don't need to do that. But yeah, I think they're thinking, let's say if Bernadette's doing it for the Chamber of Commerce and it's for their purposes, they're wondering about, should you have a standard release where people are saying it's okay.
Yeah, I mean,
you're
I would
saying-
say whatever is, obviously whatever is legal if you're required to do that, but we as journalists, I mean, based on our experience, when we go and cover some events and experience, we've never had to ask people for like releases. We just go and ask their permission and they interview, and that's like an implied release that, they agreed. But right, yeah, different occupations can have different requirements.
So why do you see on TV news journalist coverage where their face is blurred out?
It's when the person who's being interviewed doesn't want to show his or her face because of different reasons, but they want to
But
get
you
their.
don't have to comply with it.
What we do, if the person says, I don't want to show my face, I mean, we can't really show it without his or her permission.
So if you go in and do a shoot anywhere, shoot whatever you like, and no one says don't use it, you're free to just use it however you like, as a,
Yes, I would say on public places when we go and shoot stuff, on public places when we come, I guess we haven't had any hard time people saying, hey, why did you show me my face walking down the street? I mean, unless, I don't know, that was a very wanted person or something, I don't know, but the problem comes when you talk to people directly. Let's say if I came here and did your interview specifically about your personal issue or an issue and you involved it, then I have to have your permission. If you don't want to be on TV or want to share your stories, you're free to do that, and I shouldn't be pushing you for that, or I'm not required to do it without your permission. So
you're saying once they start talking to you, they've basically given their permission, and you don't need anything in writing. You're a journalist, and by them speaking to you.
Because when you identify yourself properly that you're a journalist working for so-and-so organization, and you're talking to them for that story, I think there you go. They know that you're going to report about it, and that's why you're doing it.
As long as you have that on tape.
Yeah, and quotations. I mean, you can quote them in newspapers too. So, yeah, even if you don't have a camera, you can identify them if they've agreed to.
Yeah, interview on the sidewalk, not in the driveway.
Not on the driveway. Okay, I didn't know if that
I mean,
counts.
there's a difference, right?
Oh yeah, no, you're right. Yeah.
Sidewalk is public property, driveway is not.
Different places. So, yeah.
That's a good point.
So should we move forward with videos? Well, there are 3 very basic videos that I wanted to show you. And this guy basically works for Washington Post. He's a very famous multimedia journalist. His name is Pierre Cotard, and even when I was here last time, I showed some of his stuff. He's really good with that. So he basically tells you how you, being a one-man band, can tell very powerful stories, keeping certain things in mind, and which basically wraps up what we're talking here today. And then if you have any questions regarding those videos or how we can produce those stuff on it. But these are just, I just picked up very basic 3 examples to do, and hopefully you like them. So let's
My name is Pierre Cotard. I'm a video journalist with the Washington Post. as a video journalist for the Washington Post, you know, we work largely alone. So we shoot, edit, we write, we produce the video. It's a lot to do, but it's very exciting. So when you're shooting a story that's on a tight deadline, you know, and you have to think quick, what I advise people is, like, for example, the election night video I did, okay? I had to plan out in my mind what my video was going to look like. So I said, you know what, the most important thing to get that night was the actual result. So, and after the result, you have a reaction. So there's an action and there's a reaction. My advice is just stay medium and follow the action. You know what I mean? You don't want to go too crazy, zooming in and out, you know. Just keep a nice medium shot and follow the action. When I interview people, I guess I just try to get them to talk very naturally. I try to make eye contact with them and tell them to relax as much as they can with a camera in their face. A good tip, I think, when you're interviewing somebody is do a little small talk in the beginning of the interview, find out where they're from, and the biggest thing I've learned is sharing information about myself. I find that people really click and connect with you when you share something about yourself. For video storytelling, the three things are, the most important things are any change, any event that's happening, emotion, and kind of the, you know, you have to see it to believe it. When you're telling a visual story, you want to make sure you have these components, at least one of these components. You know, is there something happening that is visible? You know, is something moving? Is there a protest? Is it a restaurant that is going through a certain look, or is the chef creating these amazing masterpieces? The second thing is emotion. You know, video is really good at capturing emotion, human emotion, and it's hard to write human emotion. So that's another thing. And then the other, the third aspect of video storytelling, I guess, is like the, you know, did you see that factor? There's nothing you can read that can help you do video journalism. I think you have to go out and do it. You know, get yourself a cheap camera and go out and start doing video stories. You will learn what works, what doesn't work.
Okay, that's the first interview. Now, did you notice that when the story started, he showed you the first clip of people just yelling and screaming on the ground, and then he showed you one shot of the breaking news that Barack Obama had won the election. That was enough to tell you what the story was, and he established the story without doing any narration, without doing any interviews, without doing anything. That's the kind of thinking or sequencing you have to have in your mind when you're telling a story. If it was done by someone who didn't know journalism, or didn't know video journalism, but was doing the first time, I don't know, he or she might have started with like a flag or people walking down to that rally or something that wouldn't have told you the story in the first two shots. In the first 4 seconds, he has told you the story, what he's doing, what he's starting, and that's the kind of, I would say, powerful emotions, and those first 4, 5, or 10 seconds make you want to watch the rest of the story too. There's a curiosity that comes among you. So that's, I think, you have to establish when you start a story. Here comes the second part.
My name is Pierre Qatar. I'm a video journalist with the Washington Post.
My name is Sheila Marie Holt Orsted. I eat, sleep, and drink, getting justice for my family.
One of my favorite stories that kind of just worked from beginning to end was a story about a woman who lived in Dixon, Tennessee, who claimed that she was a victim of environmental racism. I don't think of myself as a visual journalist. I think first, I'm a reporter. I go out in the field, I find stories, I report them. The tool I use is the video camera. Other people use a still camera. Some people use still camera and audio. Other people use the typewriter or the computer. When I'm editing, the first thing I do is I log the interviews. Okay, that means I go through the interviews and I take note of what each person said. Okay. Then I bring those interviews on the timeline. And I say, okay, because audio drives the story. Visuals don't drive the story. The audio drives the story. Okay? You're telling a story, it's audio that's going to drive it. Visuals help, but audio drives it. So I bring down basically the interview quotes. And I edit that first. I see what story is coming out of this. Who said what the best? I take down the best quotes and then I look at it and I say, okay, I think either this can stand on its own as a piece, they can speak for themselves, they're telling the story well, or I need to write something. So basically, when I edit a video, I'm editing quotes first, making sure that there's a story there, then adding the scenes later. Script writing is like tying the knots between scenes. You don't want to talk too much. You don't want to give too much information. You want to show, and then you want to explain a little bit, and you want to show. And I think that's the trick, is trying to write less, but say a lot. For people that are just starting out and think, well, I can't get into the Washington Post, I don't have a portfolio, or I can't get into El País because I don't have a portfolio. Well, you just have to start doing them. That's what I did. So my advice is go out there, shoot a couple stories, short, quick stories like a protest, your kids, a vacation video. Do those stories, edit them, show your editor, show a video friend, post it on Vimeo, get feedback. That's the best advice I can give, because that's what I did, and it worked.
Okay, is that good so far? 'Cause I'm gonna.
Good stuff.
That was a really good one.
Yeah, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Now
I like
I'm.
this guy.
I'm sorry.
I like this
Yeah.
guy.
I'm going to show you the story that he was talking about. This lady who was complaining about some environmental issues, and just see how he tells you the story. Just he doesn't do narration. He as he said, he writes a little bit of script with a black background there, just trying to explain what the story is a little bit, but the entire story is told by the lady herself. And that's the point that I was making today, just when you do those little interviews, just have your subject tell the story themselves. But the art of you making that story good is to putting their sound bites or the whole situation in the best possible sequence, in the best sequence that tells the story. So let's see that.
My name is Sheila Marie Holt Orsted. I eat, sleep, and drink, getting justice for my family. I believe that if my father had known that his well water had the 15th most toxic chemical known to man, that he would have gotten hooked up to municipal water. But the county of Dixon and the city of Dixon and the state of Tennessee and EPA failed to warn him that his family was drinking trichloroethylene. The reason I believe that this is environmental racism is because every single Caucasian family in this county that was found to have trichloroethylene or TCE in their water, according to the state records, they took them off the water, they informed them of what they had been drinking, and they provided them with a alternate water source. With the whole family, they wrote us letters telling us it was okay to drink it and that it wouldn't cause any adverse health effects. You may want to add more stuff. Our property is 57 feet from where they dump toxic chemicals. Property values in this area are zero. Probably can't give this land away. Who would want to live next to a toxic dump? It's a big dumping ground. We have a 150-acre farm that is worthless. I was so ever cease from war. Rest in Jesus' for the Lord is I am saved. In 2002, I came home to Dixon to visit my family for the Christmas holidays and found that this community was riddled with cancer. My father was one of them, and my aunt, who lives next door, had cancer. I was so concerned that I returned to Virginia and scheduled a physical, and to my surprise, I found that I had stage 2 breast cancer. I thought I was a picture of health. I was very athletic, I was a personal trainer. In 1991, I was Miss Tennessee heavyweight and mixed pairs champion. I had to fight back, and I had to find answers and tell my story and be there for the next person that might find themselves in this situation. I'm going to Washington to ask for a hearing on environmental racism, not just for my family, but across the country, to talk about better laws and enforcement of laws. What's this? It's my speech. You want me to read to you? My name is Sheila Hope Orsted. My family and I are victims of environmental racism. In December 2002, I returned to my hometown in Dixon for the Christmas holidays. I arrived to find my community riddled with cancer, including my wonderful father, who had just been diagnosed. I was so disturbed that when I returned to Virginia, where I live now, I went for a full physical. The biopsy report confirmed stage 2 breast cancer. I was devastated by the cancer diagnosis and began looking for answers. I didn't have to look far. My family's farm, the farm where I grew up, is directly adjoining to the town landfill, where the city of Dixon had allowed private companies to dump toxic chemicals for years. Among the chemicals dumped in the landfill was TCE, or trichloroethylene, a cancer-causing chemical that is used as a metal degreaser. It is one of the most toxic chemicals known to man. My father, who was diagnosed with cancer in 2002, died in January tomorrow's his birthday. My family filed a lawsuit in 2003 to find justice. Thank you for allowing me to share my story with you. I truly believe that this is my calling. I think that's why I was put on earth. Me telling my story, I'm sure has reached a lot of people. And if it's caused one family not to lose a loved one early, then our suffering hasn't been in vain.
Do you think multiple cameras were used?
I think so, yes.
Okay.
Or cameras at different times. But anything to say on the story? Did you like the story, the way it was told?
No,
You didn't?
because they didn't try to talk to anybody on camera.
On the
other
second-
side.
On the
That's
the
not
other.
balanced journalism, that's just, one-sided story. I mean,
You're right.
it's a compelling story,
Mhm.
but, even 60 Minutes will go to the other side.
You're right.
And
Yeah.
say, they denied to talk on camera or something.
Mhm.
Good news piece is
Mhm.
gonna have both sides of the story.
Right. No, that's
Especially if they can, get them on camera saying that they're not going to comment on the story, they refuse to comment.
no, you're
I think
right.
That's more powerful than not having them there.
But the fact here is we're not discussing whether it was fair or balanced or not, but the whole idea of telling someone's story, whether or not it's true or false, but it's just let them tell their stories in a way that it is mentioning the facts that they're mentioning. And you're right, they could have done a follow-up story as to what the town says or the administration says, or we don't know if the court case pending, but the whole idea of using the shots and the sequences that tell you the story of a person. That's that's the whole point is.
So it's a two-part question. So I really like the use of the B-roll.
Mhm.
It made sense after what you'd said.
Mhm.
So when she's talking about, yes, I travelled to here, blah, 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 and we're looking at the speedometer and we're seeing her walk into the house, do you think that they shot her with a camera so they could have showed her speaking? And if they did do that, then why did they choose to show the speedometer and her walking in and a lot of B-roll rather than showing her saying it?
Well, I guess the point here would be that you have one person telling her story, but the reason they're using those B-rolls is just to make those emotions more powerful or explaining the whole story in a better way. If you just had her talking, that would have explained the story itself. But the fact he showed more footage or B-roll of her house or her farm just kind of makes it more compelling to me as a viewer. So
From a technical standpoint, it was enthralling. I mean, I thought it was well done as far as putting it together.
yeah, that's the whole
I love
point.
the whole, of her driving and having the camera on
And
her
starting
while she's driving.
establishing the
Because
story.
that could, tells you that how, she's made a lot of trips.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
And, I mean, as far as what it was trying to tell, I thought it told in a very compelling way, and you were rooting for her to get some sort of justice.
Yeah. No, that's the idea that I want to talk about. I mean, every story, obviously this is a controversial issue like any other issue, and there are always two sides to it. But the point that I'm trying to make is the way you want to tell it, without having a reporter's narration, just having your subject tell his or her story with the best emotions that you can have and the best B-roll that you can have. And then it's up to the viewer to know whether they like the story or whether they think it's balanced or not. That's another debate. But the way that it's been told, with just having so many interview sound bites. I'm sure he spent like a whole day with her doing, multiple interviews, or drove with her, it seems like, and then you had maybe a long interview. And then he took out the most important parts of her sound bites and put them in an order that tells us the story in what, just 5 minutes or 6 minutes. I didn't even feel like 6 minutes maybe, as we were talking, some stories, you know, drag, but it didn't feel like to me. I was engaged into it as a viewer. That's, I think, the point we would want to make
I
as
guess I would be, the reason I brought up the other side is that listening to her story, I wanted to find out more about the story. It'd be interesting
right.
if there was a print story that went along with the video story.
No, that's a very valid point and as a journalist, you want to be balanced and, you know, as fair as you can be. That's perfectly understood. There is a reason why it's a controversial story. But my whole point is, like, you know, this tells a story at least of one side. Now we may want to listen to the other side, and that reporter could have gone there, but that could have been there. Sir. Oh, so okay.
Go ahead.
No, you.
All right, well, you know, I can identify with her because I've been watching all the Paul Gellman 1,4-dioxide metabolization for 20 years now. It's moving its way through Ann Arbor. And, you know, I can really put myself in a place in this. It's, you know, some places there is environmental racism, other places it's economic, other places it's just incompetence in terms of, you know, companies can get away with things because they have influence. You know, one meeting with one person by a company can offset 1,000 people at a public meeting. And what I'm seeing now is that in most of the public meetings I've gone to over the years, I video it. So I have this dozens of hours of video that someday I need to put together into a civil action type documentary or something to show that, you know, people really need to pay attention, and there needs to be more transparency of what's going on our behalf to avoid situations like this. And then once they happen, to get them cleaned up properly. And it's an ongoing problem, and video really makes a difference. Because you got somebody on camera saying this isn't going to happen, and then when it happens, you can go back and you can. That's not what you said back here. I mean, I get a lot of my news now from the Daily Show and the Colbert Report because they do that. They go back and say, well, that's, you know, they use irony and sarcasm, but they have the video clips to back it up.
Yeah, but it's slanted, so you can never trust them as far as are they telling the real story, or they're telling a story that they want to tell. That's why I just take them for humor, what they are. I don't believe that they're.
Well,
I think everybody tells the story.
Well, videos can lie because editing's a wonderful tool.
I mean, you can't undo it. Somebody says something at one point, they got a video that's showing they're saying one thing, and then a week before they said something else.
Yeah.
You put those two side by side. Where else can you see that?
I think I take the Daily Show over the nightly news.
Well, back to our. I'm sorry, she had a question.
I just I used to work for this educational foundation, and I shot some video to try to give. I was going to put it up on the website so people could see what kind of grants we were funding, and so it was just basically I shot this interview which I thought had a lot of good stuff in it, but I didn't know how to edit it, so I gave it to somebody. But I realize now I didn't give them enough because it was basically just an interview, and just little things like the beginning of this clip where the white line
On the
the
road.
lines on the road. I thought that was just so artistic, and I mean, when I was watching it, I wasn't saying artistic, but it just, you know, it just, I don't know, it put you there, it got you in the mood,
Engaged you.
and I can see why that B roll is so important to telling the story. And I'm sorry, just one other thing. I've been listening to the radio a lot because I've been driving my daughter to school. And when you said audio drives the story,
Yeah.
it's so true
I
because
never even thought of that.
you can listen to the radio and you're like engaged, and you feel like you've got it all going up. You know, it's all there. But if you turn the sound off on the TV, like you got nothing. So occasionally you got something, but it's just not as, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I mean,
I'm
as he
sorry.
said, audio drives the most part of emotion. I mean, you can see someone on TV crying without audio. That wouldn't be as powerful as if you had audio with it, or have their story. So audio is a very important, or the most powerful component of any story.
It was like a silent movie. Nobody watches them anymore because they like this.
Yeah, because now we have
Because the
videos with
audio
audio. Yeah.
drives home the
Yeah. I was gonna say that, similar to what Andrew said, it's, the parts of it that really engaged me were the B-roll stuff with the audio.
Yeah.
The
Natural sound.
Yeah, the picture of the farm and turning that bend in this really big, with two fields, and her talking. I mean, it would have been much less engaging if the camera had just focused on her talking the entire, I don't know, what was that, like a 9 minute or 6:45?
Yeah.
Okay, so, in this case, I was noticing her, all the shots where she was still talking, but the camera wasn't on her.
Yeah.
And that told me much more about
Explain it more.
her story,
Yeah.
about this community where she lived and how it might be possible that she could view it as environmental racism. The big mural on the side of the old brick building where, Dixon, it just was all, that added a lot of interest for me and engaged me almost more than the shots of her talking. I mean, you do want to see her though, the grave site, the walking
Her father's
away
grave,
with her relative and in their Sunday clothes and all of that,
Yeah.
But a lot of it was her voice without her
Explaining.
face,
Yeah.
it was everything else.
Yeah, so that's a very good use of B-roll. I mean,
Yes.
you could have not used it and still have the story, but just to
You
see
have a
how
whole nother
much of difference
story.
it made. Yeah.
Right, and I also was gonna say that I do recognize how one-sided it is, but, that might be part of a documentary, maybe that was like, 6 minutes of a 60-minute thing, and, I agree that it's all on her, it's all about her
Yeah.
and her
It's
side
just,
of it.
yeah, her side of it.
Right.
But it's just that it tells you the story.
Yeah, yeah.
Even if it's from one side, it's just how you would want to tell it from any side. But these are the basic components that you have to keep in your mind when you're telling someone's story. So.
Yeah, even when I watch what I think are balanced news stories, my opinion is that there is an angle. We cannot have pure journalism ever, really. We can have more balanced and show both sides, but whoever is shooting it, telling it, editing it, I mean, it really comes home to me. Your whole presentation, the editors have a lot of power to tell, or not to tell, or how to tell it, you know what I mean? That's all done in, the only experience I have with this is that I was interviewed for a segment of 30 days, and they ended up, it was a very long interview with the person who was spending 30 days in an environment that she morally didn't believe in, and in the end, they never used my video, and I was actually very glad because a lot of it was quite personal and involved members of my family who didn't even know I was doing this, and the stuff that we were talking about on the interview. But I couldn't get over how much footage they shot for an hour segment of 30 days. I could not get over it. It was like days of video. I mean, they on that particular show, they literally moved in for 30 days and they shot footage for 30 days. It was like, I can't even imagine how much they shot, and then they boiled it down into a 60-minute segment. It was unbelievable.
Yeah,
and so the editor has a lot of.
You're right. When we watch it, much of it has to do, like you said, with editing. Just imagine the amount of time that a reporter or a journalist has to spend to carve out the best piece of that story to make you.
And all
as
the
a
while, they are the ones defining what is the most important point, what is the most important idea. So really, that's why we don't really have pure journalism, but we do have trained people.
I'm sorry, I think had a question, and then you had a question.
Yeah, I was just a comment, as a storytelling, maybe someone else noticed that the time of year that they made this video, everything is brown, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, so that means it was what,
It
spring?
looked toxic.
yeah, toxic and brown and.
Yeah, there is that.
Yeah. Sorry.
I was trying to watch it from like a clinical point of view, and I imagine maybe several's work. Trying not to get so much engaged in the story, but looking at what we're learning here and taking back. And I agree with her and several people here about the, I guess it was the B-roll stuff. What struck me was the pastoral countryside scenes, birds chirping,
Right.
cows grazing
Yes.
on one side, and on the other side, hidden killer. You know,
Right.
it's just the contrast between the two, I think, helped build the
Yeah,
drama.
some faraway brick complex with barbed wire, you know, that was all we could see of that,
Yeah.
you know, yeah.
So I like that. One thing I maybe, as opposed to others here, I got a little, tired of it at the end, thinking that it was just dragging on a little bit, but I think part of that was, then I realized this was not really a short news piece for the nightly news, it was more of a documentary, a
Yeah,
short
it's
one.
a feature.
So it's more of like a 60 minutes type thing or whatever.
Yes.
And my expectations were not there, and maybe that's why it dragged from me, I don't
Yeah.
know.
I was just gonna follow on what she said about editing time. Like my rule of thumb when I shoot a live event, if I can Ustream it and everything's done, I'm done. But if I have to go back and edit it, then it's like at least 3 times as long.
Yeah.
Whatever, if it's an hour, it's 3 hours at least of editing. What's your rule of thumb for editing time versus time of actual finished product?
Well, again, it depends on what your project is, what your deadline is, who you're working for, and I can tell you on a daily basis, if we as reporters work for a different news organization, sometimes we only have a day to do the interviews, to shoot the B-roll, and to edit it and put it up on our web. So everything has to come down to that 8-hour shift. And that does affect or compromise the quality of the stuff. But again, from my own personal experience, if I am a strong believer in my story, if I feel like this really needs more time, this really needs more duration, I'll fight for it with my editors, with whoever is responsible for putting that story, because if it's not told in the right way, there's no way, the whole effort of spending the whole day is wasted. If I am not able to translate the story that the other person wants to tell, what's the point of going out and shooting the interview and editing the whole stuff and, just having it in a 1-minute piece?
Right. A follow-up on that is, let's say you've got a story and it might build into another story or a week-long story or something. How do you keep your raw video so you can re-edit into a longer story?
We
you
do.
Just regularly do that?
Mm-hmm. We, in fact, I believe every news organization has a system of archiving their video, photos and story stuff, because you never know, maybe 10 months or 10 days or 1 day down the road you may need a follow-up. And that especially happens with issues that are, long wrong. Sometimes the, big crime stories that you have to follow up the trial and the conviction and sentencing and everything, and then, even events like these, when you have an issue developing in a county, these stories just get dragged on for years and years. So it's always better to have videos archived so that, again, what somebody or some official said like 2 years back and what the situation was today. It really helps. Anything else?
Is it, I don't have a lot of equipment. I do have an iPad which has a camera in it. And I do have a Mac which has that
Movie.
Is it a problem to shoot video in, like if I shot in this and then tried to edit it in,
iMac?
yeah.
There shouldn't be a problem. Once you plug it with your iMac, it should be able to convert the video. It should let you convert those videos from your iPad into your iMac. And as if you connect on iTunes, it just syncs all the folders. That's what, unless somebody else has experienced anything else.
So you just put your
You connect
video-
your iPad with your Mac, and then you go onto iTunes software, and then it shows you all the folders that this device will have, and then you can copy paste it from there.
You might need to add an external disk at some point if you're using up all your disk space on your Mac.
And it's going to be very difficult for you to keep a steady shot holding an iPad. Is there no other camera that you have? Do you have a phone camera?
It's not very, well, I think my whatever contract is just about up, so maybe I.
So the iPhone 5, they just, you can look up Business Review or Business Week. They just did an article 2 days ago. High budget bank commercial in London. Did you see that? It just got shot with an iPhone 5.
Well, there's been movie shot.
Really?
And there's been movies shot. So, you know, they spend, you know, millions on promoting this video. It was shot on an iPhone 5, big budget bank commercial. So if you're going to get that iPhone 5 camera, you know, you just got to get steady, and there's apps that you can download that steady it, you know, and just get used to that, little guy. You know, just go upgrade.
Yeah, nowadays there's so many, you're right, apps that allow you, even the most immature videographers, to sort of stabilize their shots, color correct them, and lots of things are becoming like so easy, I guess, which were sort of unbelievable, I would say, like 5 years back or even 2 years back for those bigger cameras. So
I have a Samsung S3 that I shoot HD video with, and I actually adapted a car phone holder to work on a tripod.
Brilliant.
And it works great. I've shot, you know, all around. The problem is with this, and it's Mac's fault, even though this is an Android device, is that it only shoots 20 minutes of video before you have to press to start recording again. It's because I just told them it's because there's a Mac limit that they have to adhere to of 4 gigabytes in a segment.
yeah, I guess that's the case with major.
The tripod, $39. You get your whole rig.
Yeah. You do want to have your power cord plugged in so you don't run your battery down the whole time.
Yeah, that's another thing.
Then.
The other thing I wanted to ask,
Super low budget.
And you can have an external mic too. You can put an external mic on this. I'm looking at an iPhone.
I'm not sure.
well, by the way, the other thing I wanted to know is, and obviously if there are any more questions, we still have some time. Looking at what we discussed today, and I understand some of the people mentioned that they've done some video works before and shot it. Does this presentation, or you know, watching those stories, videos, does that change your mind towards how you're going to shoot your next video now, and if that gives you any motivation that you might want to produce some videos, even if for your own and not for your newspapers? Does that help? Is there anything you could think of that you might be doing different in the future than what you've been doing before?
I'll shoot a lot more B-roll now.
Yeah, exactly. The main thing is the B-roll.
And even if it's not the same year, you know, B-roll is B-roll.
You know? And you might want to produce some stories, I don't know, community-based stories, or just any event to.
There's a lot of stories that need to be told though.
So many.
So
Time thing.
with your news reporting on anyone in the room, how are you getting your stories in, like, you know, Michigan? Like, what's your sources and what's, oh, that's a story, let's go. Like, what's that process?
Well, if you spend a day with any news organization that does a daily news, has a daily newspaper or a TV channel, of course there are different sources, and their major sources are the reporters, basically, who have different, as they call it, beats or areas or communities that they cover. That we are their foot soldiers. But nowadays, I guess, a lot of it is changing because of different communication tools that we're getting today. I think I'd say many of the stories these days we get is from the words we hear on social media, some of the stuff about communities that we didn't know on ourselves, and it was somebody gave a shout out, somebody threw a ball in the air, and then we pick that stuff from there and kind of, you know, follow our path on it and dig more into it to find out the stories. So there's a huge world filled with stories, but whatever, you know, what makes it more interesting is, again, the angle you take it, the kind of story you want to tell, and how you tell it, how you present it. I think that makes your story different and better from your competitors or from the other?
That's all interesting. So are you getting your stories from people posting on your social media, or are you tracking keywords and through everything that's going on?
I mean, it depends on what my interest is. I mean, apart from me following, our social media page, I have my own, obviously, friends and family and life and different interests that I follow. Sometimes, I get some kind of information or an interesting subject from things that I follow on social media, and then I realize, hey, that makes a little sense to my community, or that makes a little relevance to Michigan, and I, try to localize that stuff, and that's how you go. And sometimes these are major events. I mean, something happens in your community, there's a tragedy, there's an accident, and those are the daily events. But I'm talking about issues like these where, very little thing happens maybe in your neighborhood to your neighbor, and that turns out to be a larger issue, and that's how you start from there. So yeah, you really have to, I would say, keep your eyes and ear open all the time to see what's happening around.
Yeah, what's happening right now with journalism and newspapers and coverage is that we're lacking investigative journalists because they don't have the budgets to assign somebody to a story for 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
So that void's going to be filled by citizen journalism, and video's going to be part of it.
And
what do you mean, Roger? Like, how's a citizen video going to take 3 months?
Somebody has some free time and they say, this is a story I'm interested in telling, and I'm going to go out and tell it, and then put it on the web or feed it to a news source.
And I have a feeling, I mean, if you've noticed it, in the past few years, amateur videos, the videos that are on YouTube, have taken so much of importance. Now they're so important now that, and I, as a broadcast journalist who was trained to producing video reports, sometimes feel that you don't really have to be a very experienced broadcast journalist to report a story. Many of the stories that we've seen have gone viral over the internet were just shot by random people who were just walking down the street. They saw something was happening, they recorded an interview, they shot a video. That blew the story. Nobody cared about the production part, but the content was very strong that you couldn't have missed it. I remember still the most watched video on our website, as far as I know, was just a raw clip of an argument or an intense argument that happened in courtroom. A guy was being convicted for the murder of another boy, and his family was sitting there, and all of a sudden the guy who was about to be convicted said, you all care about the person I killed, but what about my future and this and that? And the whole family got, they were on fire, and they started throwing swear words at each other. And it was just like 1 minute video, but that went so viral, and it was all over the internet. So those kind of stuff, which you can't even expect or imagine, that's just a raw video. Anyone could have shot it. So all of a sudden that becomes a sensation. So it's really up to the content that you're shooting.
I feel like when you said somebody who has some free time, I feel like nobody in my world has any free time. Like, everybody is like overloaded with trying to learn all this stuff, and I feel like my whole job is just eliminating shit from my psyche. Like, okay, I don't need to do that. Yeah, exactly. Although here I am, and this is I'm only here because somebody on our marketing committee wanted to do video, but hey, this actually fits in with a lot of stuff that I like and have done, and it's kind of like I didn't plan it. So I guess what I'm trying to say is I feel like intuition or a gut feel or just the circumstance carrying you along is having a bigger play in what stories get told.
You said you drove your daughter to school.
Yeah.
And you go to the school plays and the events.
Yeah.
And now if you notice, during the events, half the people are taking video.
Yeah, true.
And gee, I bet that shot's better than that shot. Why are those people not putting it in a central place? Letting each other pick up the best of everything.
So it doesn't necessarily have to make extra time, it's that you have to be ready when the shot's available to take.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
that's,
you got
that,
that
that's
in
sort
your
of a
pocket.
serendipity thing, like, but the readiness part of it
And
is,
if you
yeah.
do Google
there-
Glass, then it's gonna be all the time.
Well, they're still in the trying phase, but that's a wonderful thing too. And I'm always really tech savvy, and it's really going to make difference in the amateur video making now, because then it'll always be it'll always be with you, so you'll record every moment. You won't have to like take out your hand or something; it'll just be on your head. So the world's changing fast. So.
No. Not those places.
How can you miss her? That is.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I think she was like.
Yeah, I'm a little out there today. I just wanted to put in my 2 cents on this whole like presentation. You know, I'm like just starting out, like just out of college. I just got my job at Heritage, and I know we're expected to like put videos, like we're expected to pump out videos in addition to our written work. And I've been hiding for the last month behind like, oh, I'm new still. I'm just like working my own way. Like, so I was just really uncomfortable with the idea of like making a video and expecting people to like actually want to watch it and have it look good. But now I feel like I'm already thinking of like some of my upcoming stories and how maybe I'll focus less on the written story because maybe like a visual component would be more appropriate. So like I feel like this was just a really helpful, like I'm glad I came. I had no idea what I was expecting. But now I'm like, you know, sort of like working it out in my mind. So I'm really glad, like, I don't know, I just thought this presentation was really helpful.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
Very much.
Crystal, I just want to add that you came on my radar when you did that story. I think it was Willow Run or Ipsy Schools, and there was a lockdown, and you recorded audio of the parents on the scene outraged that the school officials were telling them that it was a routine drill when it was not. There was police on the scene, and having her tell a story. And I was like, that was awesome. And it went longer than 2 minutes. Generally, our videos are 2 minutes, so the audio you're able to go longer. So I think that this will just be a natural extension for you of what you're already doing, and I think it's very good. You have enthusiasm for it.
Thanks.
And like I said, even when you do all daily stuff, always think in terms of doing video with every story you do. You may not end up using that video as a story, but always shoot some stuff, because you never know what comes out to be the best part of your video. Sometimes you're doing some interview and the person tells you a thing, you know, which is a very strong soundbite. Don't just think in terms of 90 seconds or 2 minutes or 5 minutes. You could just embed like a 30-second soundbite with your story, but that soundbite might prove to be way more stronger than your written stuff, and that really helps.
I guess that's where I'm just still sort of confused about the interviewing somebody and the B-rolls and all that stuff. Is it just better to shoot a bunch of B-roll, and then when you interview somebody, you don't necessarily have to put their face on the screen, you just put their voices over?
And then the B-roll explains the story. No, yeah, that could work out perfectly too.
Especially if they don't want to be on camera, or you know, if they're
I've never had
bad hair day or something.
I've never had so much that. It was just like I didn't know whether to just, you know, run somebody talking, and then, you know, with their face, you know, like you're talking to somebody, and then whether they should just be the audio while the B-roll's going on.
And I guess
that's the thing I struggle with when I make my videos. I'm not sure which is the better approach. I
guess you can, if you want to, use their face when you don't have the B-roll to explain what they're saying in that moment. So, let's say they're talking about some event which you already have B-roll, you can put over it, but then they flip and, you know, talk about something else that happened in the past and you don't have the B-roll of that. You can, you know, let their face come on camera for like 10, 20, 15 seconds and then come back with B-roll. So it all depends on how you want to tell the story. It's all completely up to you. So you tell it, the better way you tell it, you know, the more people.
There are other people in your same situation. And if you have 2 or 3 other people who you're friends with, and you do the same, you can kind of review each other's work.
And I would make one recommendation to all of the people who are here before they leave. And it all depends on your interest. If you're interested in producing videos, and if you like the way we talked about here, and if you want to tell different stories, just spend some time on learning those little tools of video editing softwares. just go on YouTube, find some time. I would say take out 10 minutes out of your daily schedule, 15 minutes out of it. Just search on YouTube about what you want to do with videos. Let's say if you want to learn how to do multi-camera shooting videos, just type. I'm sure there wouldn't be anything that you wouldn't be finding little tips on. That would really help. Those 10 minutes may end up changing your perspective about how you shoot videos or how you edit them, but learn those little editing tricks. They're really going to help you. I'm telling you now, that's a very big tool.
And Washington Community College has courses, either through credit courses or continuing education courses on it also.
Yeah, so that could help. But like I said, even on daily, I'm sure you'll be able to find some time off, I don't know, Facebook or Twitter, and spend some time, 5 minutes on it. I'm not really a Twitter fan. I don't know why. I just spend most of my time on Facebook, but that's how I am. But a lot of people.
That makes me feel so much better.
Really? Well, thank you. And some time on my kid too. That he's also important more than Facebook.
How old's your kid?
10 months.
Well, there you go. So
Yeah.
you're gonna have like video.
Yeah.
Video of him, yeah,
Pictures are
learning
much
and
better.
and all that.
How much video do you have him already? Turn his whole life into a 2-minute video.
Yeah, and if he does something nasty, that could become like viral video. I don't know.
You read
Maybe
about
slap on my face and I record it. Who knows? With
read
Google
about that
Glass.
guy at MIT or Harvard who, as a research project, videoed everything for his kid from like 0 to 5 or something. Yeah, I don't know how many terabytes of video hit, but it was like, there was a lot of stuff in there about how language develops.
Wow,
Where
wonderful.
do you
I've
see
seen
that?
people's videos of who've shot who've taken pictures of their kid every day
Yes.
and then making them
Yeah.
collage, and that shows you how that was wonderful.
And the easy way to do that, if you got pictures of your kid, is put them on Picasa
Mhm.
and train Picasa to identify people.
Mhm.
So I've got exactly that I just did of both my kids from when they're babies all the way to adulthood now. Picasa makes a thumbnail of their face, and it centers on the nose. So when you do put the thumbnails together into a clip,
Mhm.
you're basically seeing the changes over the years.
And it also identifies the change, like how new or old that picture is. Like
Well,
puts it.
I haven't dated all the stuff I scan.
Oh, okay. So it
Well,
goes
once
by
I
the
do
date.
that, I can put it in order so that they actually go in completely ordered. Right now, there's jumps around a little bit. But the interesting thing is, I didn't throw away a lot of the images.
Mhm.
If there was an image like that, maybe they're making a face or something, because you're not going to show that. But in this, it's perfect because you're seeing their normal face, and then you're seeing their emotions. As one of these random photos comes up. Oh yeah, that was that's
Yeah.
So it was kind of to know that there was some photos that you wouldn't normally show, but in this sequence, it makes a difference.
Yeah.
There's a funny website where you can put your picture in there, and it'll come up who you look like what famous people you look like. Have you ever done that?
No, but
You should try it.
yeah.
It's really funny, and it's weird too. Like my one daughter, we put her in. She came up looking like every person she looked like was Asian, and then Tony Soprano from The Sopranos.
Oh.
It's like what?
What website is that? Do you
I
remember the
forget the name of it. We did it a while
How
back.
about if you just Google
But
who
if
do
you
I look like or
look
what
like-
celebrity do I look like,
Yeah.
you'll find something.
It's
Yeah.
funny.
Yeah.
There are lots of
It's
things
entertaining.
on the internet. By the way, back to the video training session.
Sorry about
So
that.
it's always interesting to share different stories and learn about it. Well, thank you very much for everyone coming in here and joining us today and making this what it is today. And any questions, I'm over the internet. I have Facebook, and you can find me on theoaklandpress.com with my name or Facebook. Be in touch. I'll always be available.
Oh wow.
Do you
Oh my
ever
god, so tight.
do any sessions like this on actual editing? Because that would be super
I
helpful.
haven't done one yet on it. This is the second video section that I've done here, but yeah, I can plan something on editing too.
Like I know personally, like we would probably find that really helpful.
Yeah, I've done most of my stuff on my own.
Sure.
My videos are crap.
No.
I have zero experience with that.
No, sure. I can plan something depending on how available we're there. But like I said, if there's anything that question that comes out of your mind, just shoot me a note, email, or call me there.
Okay.
So for a lot of us, probably I've heard it's a software issue.
Yes.
A lot of staff have Macs, so they can anywhere they go. I don't have a PC, and our demos that we get can't handle video, so I'm limited. I have to come 60 miles to go edit a video whenever I want to do something.
So what are you editing right now on?
Nothing. I haven't started this video.
But when you started, would you have a Mac? Oh, would you have a Mac or?
We have one in the office, but I have mine. I just have.
Yeah, we've got one, we've got like a lever or whatever in the office, but that's the only one. So a lot of us, we don't have, the only way to do videos is if you go in the office. A lot of the other staff, they have
Yeah, and then like.
personal iMacs, so they can do whatever they want.
Yeah, iMacs are really very helpful in terms
Yeah, they're
of
in the
but sure, anything, just shoot me a note and
I'll send you some of my video, maybe, and just, you can just say, maybe you could have done this or that. I wanna do what, the company wants us to do video, no matter what.
I'm sorry, you're based in,
Saline.
Saline, okay, because I'm sure you know about this new show that we're gonna do like 3 days a week now.
Yeah.
We will be in search of like stories, interesting stories from different.
Yeah, I was at the training at
Sure.
Macomb.
So whenever you feel like there's a story that you want to pitch in that needs to be told, because for that we may not need videos all the time, but we will need Skype interviews with reporters to tell those stories, and I think that you guys would be a good resource for that.
Yeah,
Sure.
that's what I thought this was gonna be about, more on that.
Yeah. So just let us know.
Okay.
Things like that, and she's getting some,
Still like, I go in there, just like, let's just get this over with.
WCC that you're using is at Paradox. But yeah, it's also huge.
I'm gonna go back to There's the 18 stories that I come up with in the last 2 days, and actually edit some videos.
well, my daughter does it, but
Where do
she's,
you live?
she's a little slow in
Hillsdale.
getting into
Oh,
social media.
travel along.
I'm ahead of her, I'm not
So
using
we're gonna get a Mac.
anything with computers or anything anymore. Even though I got it.
Yeah, I'm not too.
Well, I'm not either, but I just want, well, I am, but I've become a PC person because that's cheaper, like, because Macs are too expensive.
She actually has people looking for her.
I got, what I got here, this is.